always start with the men. I know that most people don't like that. I talk about it in my books. I talked about it on my talks, but we start with the men because what I believe to be true based off of the data and then for the result, and then based off of what we hear on YouTube, these women are tired. They're exhausted. They're tired of being modern. They're tired of being boss babes, baddies, divas, which I highlighted in my book. They're waiting for men to literally come and retire them. Not just not. I mean, and most people are like, well, not all women. I don't want to be retired. You're saying that out of a communicated or experienced trauma. You would love to be like Big Mama and Big Daddy. Now, for the audience that's younger, you don't know Big Daddy. You want to know why you don't know Big Daddy? Because Big Daddy died in the late 80s, in the 90s. He married one woman. He had 11 kids with that same woman. He didn't have any kids outside of the street, regardless of what the internet will tell you. He was a tradesman or had a great career in the city. He worked at the same company for 40, 50 years, retired from that company, bought a house, and sent all of his kids either through the military or through college. That was the choice. And then when he retired, he had the freedom to do things like golf and travel and work on cars and spend time at the lodge and spend time with his buddies. Big Mama never had to work. If Big Mama worked, it was temporary because Big Mama knew her job was these 11 kids, this house, getting him on the train to go to Chicago at 5:45 every morning, getting the kids up, getting them out the door, getting lunch and dinner ready for the younger kids, getting dinner ready. And then when he came back, pick him up at the train station, bring him back, and then we go from there. Big Mama, when Big Daddy died, never remarried because why would she? She's not going to get a better outcome than that. And so when you came up, young people, and you're in your 20s to mid 30s, you never knew Big Daddy. We all remember Big Daddy because we were taught by Big Daddy, and Big Daddy gave us the blueprint of success. Now, the internet and the market will tell you that there were no men in any household at any given time, any time. That stopped at slavery for most Black people. That's not true. You had men in the household at 80% marital rates all the way up until 1968. And then it falls off a cliff. We now have households that are 30%. We have we have people who are married. We have our best group is 51% married, two-parent household. The rest of the groups are in the 30s. We have immigrants coming to the country who have better marital outcomes and better marital statistics than Americans. So you didn't know Big Daddy. So you thought Big Mama ran it all. And so Big Mama had a house. When she died, she left the house to the oldest, and the oldest messed it up. She, as the young people said, she tricked it off. She lost it in a gambling debt. She lost it because she refinanced it when she didn't pay the taxes on it. And so the communicated trauma was everything bad happened can be pointed back to when Big Daddy left, when Big Daddy died. Everything started to fall off the cliff. I can look at both sides of my family. There was a major difference in the tone and the intention around both sides of the family once JW passed and then when Clifton passed. And it was because, and both of my grandmothers, God rest Lily B's soul, Clarice is still kicking, but there was a shift. There was a tonal shift. And what they realized is I got to figure all this out. And if you were like my dad stepped up, I have an uncle who stepped up on both sides. So they had to step up and kind of be that matriarch. And unfortunately, we're talking about the women here. They haven't seen that. They don't know what a good relationship over a 40-year period looks like because 80% of us are coming into single parent households. And single parent households have a revolving door of partners that come in and out. And those partners come in and out and they leave and they do trauma to children. So if you're 33 right now and single and you came from a single parent or a broken household, I honestly feel bad for you. Humble yourself, get into a church. Ladies, find you a mentor. Brothers, find yourself a mentor who's where you want to be and do exactly what they say to do and don't do what they tell you not to do. It is the best. Mentorship is going to be the best way. I believe that you should probably find a mentor in the church. If you're a Christian, you should find you a mentor if you're at the mosque. If You are someone who's at the synagogue, find you a mentor. But really, those two communities do a really good job of mentorship. But that's a whole nother discussion. Make sure you find yourself a mentor who's where you are and where you want, and then you can start to get those better life outcomes.
I see a little bit of revisionist history now that you mentioned from when Big Daddy passed on. Growing up in it, because I remember growing up with my grandmother, and I remember that strongly. Now, all these years later, the way some people talk about that time period is no, he wasn't that great. He was abusive. He had all these children outside of wedlock, all these things. And then if you're old enough to remember living through it, even though you're probably young enough, let's say under 15, and you look back on it, you're like, that is totally not true. But what has happened, I think, is maybe the firstborn, the secondborn, they kind of got
Mm-hmm.
caught up, right? And they didn't debunk these things. And then when they had children, all they knew was their mother. They didn't know their grandparents because their grandparents are probably gone. But to your point, like our grandparents had a lot of children and then it started to decrease. But then you saw all these people starting having kids without the man. So they're thinking, no, it was never 80%. Like even when you go to them and you say, hey, if you go to like blackdemographics.com and you see that the
Mm-hmm.
most active parents in all of the household are black men, they don't even want to
No, it's
believe
not.
it.
They can't because that goes against the programming. The programming tells them that specifically black men are not involved as parents. And if you ask women outside of the black community who have children with black men, they're like, "Oh no, he's involved." It is less than it is less than we should pull up the data. But in multi-ethnic, multicultural homes where the black man is there, I believe the number is closer to 60, 68%, where it has been communicated that they are active participants in the child rearing, child care, which is different, and parenting. So what is being communicated is that Big Daddy, going back to your point to close that, he had a bunch of kids. Most of the Big Daddies that we know didn't have kids. You know, the ones who did have kids, their sons, Big Daddy sons. All his kids that were born in the 1950s and 1960s are the ones that started having a bunch of kids outside. And then it gets tied to Big Daddy, who only had one woman. And so Big Daddy's sitting here getting dumped on, and all he did was take care of his woman, take care of his kids, put a roof over their head, put food in their mouth, discipline them. Big Daddy did go to parent teacher conferences if he had to. He went to church. He was on the usher board. He was a deacon. He was a leader in the community. That is what I believe is missing. And then when you go back to the original point, that is what men want to see in the church. Men tie themselves to something that's bigger than themselves, and they need to see people who are actually living out the calling versus people who are talking about the calling, which really appeals more to women. Women like to feel good about what they're hearing. Men want to see the result and the action of what they're being told.